Yeah, good morning.
Good morning.
Sir.
Good
Good morning,
evening.
sir.
Yeah, today
Morning, sir.
I'll be taking the class today, and I will be building on what previous lecturers and teachers have taught you. And basically today we'll be looking at partial equilibrium, and this should not be new to you because in the course of other classes you've experienced, you've made use, extensively of concept of partial equilibrium. And we'll start with what partial equilibrium is. Partial equilibrium basically, it can be likened to a situation whereby you want to analyze a particular market. Maybe you are focusing on markets for potato. And you carry out all your analysis, to the extent that you're able to determine an equilibrium, the price, determine the equilibrium price, determine the equilibrium quantity, and without considering other alternative to potato, which is yam. By the time you carry out this type of analysis without giving consideration to any close substitutes, to any composite commodities, and what you've done is called partial equilibrium. And in a more formal sense, we can be looking at equilibrium, in this, in a more specific way. Basically, partial equilibrium is an economy analysis that examines a single market or industry. Now, apart from the fact that you can focus on when you say single market, you might just be discussing a single commodity in this case. When you are discussing a single commodity in this case, you can also be looking at industry. You can move beyond, a single commodity. You can start to discuss industry as well. Why discussing industry? What you are particular about that? You want to analyze, you are focusing specifically on that industry. Let me give you an instance now. When the MTN and the telecom sector increases the price of their products, everybody was trying to look at what's going to be the price of data, what's going to be the price of. We are basically analyzing what is particular. We are basically focusing on that sector without looking at other sectors. What's going to be the effect on the banking sector that that relies so much on the ICT, inputs from the telecom sector without looking at other sector. There is no sector in an economy, there is no sector that is in isolations, or that is no sector that is not connected with other sector. By the time you are focusing on a single sector or on a single industry, without looking at their system, the entire economic system as a whole, what you are basically doing, what the analysis you are carrying out in that instance is basically a partial equilibrium analysis. And the concept of partial equilibrium analysis is, defined by Leroy-Lopsy. A partial equilibrium is one which is based on only a restricted range of data. You are working with a restricted range of data. You are not working with the entire data available in an economy. A standard example is the price of a single product. The price of all other products being fixed during the analysis. And when you see that mostly in economics, by the time you work, factor determines commodity, factor influencing demand, there's a concept we use generally. We use it a whole lot. We call it ceteris paribus. The ceteris paribus, by the time you are using ceteris paribus, it depicts or it shows basically that the analysis you are carrying out is a partial equilibrium because you are holding other variable that ordinarily should have gotten their influence or should influence what you're analyzing. But you want to hold them constant. You want to hold them fixed. The whole essence of holding them fixed is to make your analysis a very straightforward analysis and to be able to, drive home your point as quickly as possible. And in the real life, all these variables also matter. By the time you are carrying out this type of analysis, you are basically doing carrying out a partial equilibrium analysis. And in most cases, it can be applicable to a single consumer, can be applicable to a producer, or it can be applicable to a single industry or an example of partial, when you are talking of partial equilibrium analysis. It doesn't have any, any restrictions. It can be a single industry, a single firm, a single commodity, a single consumer, as the case may be. And partial equilibrium analysis examine the effect of policy actions in creating equilibrium only in that particular sector or market, which is directly affected. And what readily comes to mind in this instance is the new subsidy removal of federal government. The new subsidy removal of federal government in oil and gas sector. The oil and gas, government just removed the subsidy in oil and gas sector. Government did not remove any subsidy in any other sector, but you could see the ripple effect. How the removal of subsidy in oil and gas sector, the ripple effect in other sector, transportation activities became so costly, and it impacted on the commodities. Yeah, that's to tell you that partial equilibrium in most cases, you are just trying to close your eyes to the ripple effect, your analysis we have on other sector. When government introduced this subsidy, the price removed the subsidy, the price of petroleum products went up, and it's still up, as we speak. But there will be a new equilibrium price and there will be a new equilibrium quantity. And despite the fact that you are going to have a new equilibrium price and new equilibrium quantity, which is being driven or which was orchestrated by the removal of that subsidy, at that point, you do not know what the equilibrium, because this ripple effect will create equilibrium price in other, on other commodity or in other sector of the economy as well. There will be, by the time you have this new equilibrium price in petroleum sector, there will be new equilibrium price, okay, let me even curtail it to the oil and gas sector alone. By the time government removes equilibrium subsidy on petroleum, there are other allied products like kerosene, like diesel, and all of that. There are going to be a distortions of their own equilibrium as well. What is going to be the new equilibrium in oil, in diesel? What is going to be the new equilibrium in kerosene and some other allied products? We don't care about that. But by the time you want to focus your analysis, you basically focus your analysis on the new equilibrium price for petroleum product, but for petroleum alone, neglecting what is going to be the effect on kerosene and what is going to be effect on diesel. And apart from that, what is going to be the effect on the prices of commodities, rice, the basic commodity that you consume, the agricultural products, by extensions. That means that basically we curtail, in partial equilibrium analysis, we curtail our analysis to the issue at hand, to the commodity we are discussing. And to formalize it more, Leron Warros first formalized the idea of one period economy equilibrium of general economic system. And because we are trying to run away from a general equilibrium analysis, which can be very complicated, because by the time you want to go into general equilibrium analysis, you need a whole lot of mathematical analysis to do, to be able to see if there's a change in, if there's a distortion in a particular market, how does it affect the other market? Because we are trying, in most cases, we are trying to run away. And, somebody like Warren just formalized this idea of one period economic equilibrium of general economic system. But it was a French economist, Anthony Augustin Cournot, and English political economist Alfred Marshall, who developed tractable model to analyze economic system. Having realized the limitations of this partial equilibrium as formalized, as invented by the early economists, people like Laurent Warros and the like, they now made it compulsory. They put it on themselves to create a more general equilibrium, which general equilibrium is it's not part of your content, it's not part of your course outline. We may not be able to delve into that. But there is, apart from this one period economic equilibrium that we do, we also have what we call a general economic equilibrium that involve all the market at the same time, instead of looking at one market at a time. Now, let's look at, as part of that introduction, in general equilibrium analysis, we do make a whole lot of assumptions. What are those assumptions? Assumptions in partial equilibrium start from independent of market. In general equilibrium analysis, we assume that the market we analyze we are trying to analyze is independent of all other markets, which is very, which is very, very strong assumptions as as it is, because there is no way one market will be independent of other markets. But that is assumption that underline partial equilibrium. We believe that the market is independent. Price in related commodities, substitute complement are assumed to be constant. We assume that if the price of petroleum changes, increases, the price of diesel will remain the same, the price of kerosene will remain the same, and the transportation cost will also remain the same. That is just an assumption. Price taking behavior. We also believe that there's a price taking behavior. Buyers and sellers are price taker, meaning that whatever Alhamdulillah. We assume that, sorry about that. Now we assume that buyers and sellers are price taker, whatever the market dictates or the market bring to them, that is they're going to accept it. And we also assume a perfect competitive market. We assume that all the assumptions that are embedded in the perfect competitive market are also present in the market we are trying to analyze. And based on that analysis, it makes and in most cases we use I've explained this, we use ceteris paribus, which basically means other factor constant. We hold other factors like taste, like income, technology, inputs, we assume they are constant, which is always very difficult to achieve. Only one variable, and because of all the other factor constants, we are trying to focus on one variable. And what are the we are trying to focus on one market, and we are most interested in maybe one or two variables: the price of the markets we are trying to analyze, and the quantity that that is going to be at the equilibrium quantity after taking all other after the interactions between those key variables. And we also assume there's a single market, that all matter to us is just analysis is restricted to one goods or one service at a go. And no general equilibrium feedback. In the general equilibrium, we also there's what we call feedback effect. We don't assume that there's a feedback, because in the first place, we assume the market is independent. No feedback effect is expected. We assume that when the price of petrol increases, it does not bring about a feedback effect in such a way that there will be a ripple or multiple effect on the price of petrol. That's what we are. And we also assume constant return to scale, which I think Dr. Ajayi explained to you. Constant return to scale. And what do you mean by constant return to scale is basically that the production process do not experience either economies of scale or diseconomies of scale. Economies of scale meaning that when you introduce an input, it gives you more output than the input introduced. That's economies of scale. And the other one, which is the economies of scale, when you change one input, you are expected to get more output. And what we mean by constant return to scale is that when you introduce one input, you are getting one extra output. That is constant return to scale. There's no magnifications in this sense in any way. Firm adjust output without affecting cost significantly. It's also possible for firm to adjust their output without having a significant effect on their costs. And these are assumptions that underline partial equilibrium analysis. But we need to also look at what are those. This partial equilibrium analysis can be applied in several ways, and we can now look at specific policy action of government that under which partial equilibrium can be analyzed. But before we go into that, let's look at some distinctions, the difference we have between partial equilibrium and general equilibrium. There are key major distinctions, differences between partial equilibrium and general equilibrium. The first one is that the partial equilibrium focuses on one market, while general equilibrium focuses on all markets in the economy. The labor market focus on factor markets, commodity markets, financial markets, and all other markets within the economy. And in the case of general equilibrium, we are trying to simultaneously determine, what is going to be the equilibrium positions in different markets. And assumptions, in the case of partial equilibrium, we have all other markets remain unchanged. And that's the case of partial equilibrium. We assume that all other markets remain unchanged. They are stagnant, they are constant. The activities in those markets are constant. But in the case of general equilibrium, we believe that all markets are interconnected. There is always a ripple effect from one market, moving to other markets. Whenever there is a problem or there is a distortion, as a result of government policy, or as a result of other factors, maybe climate change, weather change, or anything. One market, there's a way it affects other markets. That means all the markets in the case of general equilibrium are assumed to be interconnected. They are just they're like a web. Whatever happens, there will be effects, there will be feedback effects here and there, and that makes it a general equilibrium. And it's always easier to analyze partial equilibrium. Analysis in partial equilibrium requires simple mathematical tools. It's always very easy to analyze in partial equilibrium. But in the case of general equilibrium, it requires a whole lot of mathematical tools, a strong mathematical tools. When you have to, maybe you have 5 simultaneous equations to solve. We are talking of financial market. What is going to be the equilibrium in financial market, equilibrium in factor market, equilibrium in commodity market at the same time? That means you have to do a whole lot of simultaneous equations, and it requires a whole lot, a big mathematical capability to address, sufficiently. And okay, more importantly, I think we'll focus more on the application. These are things you can easily relate with, and you can to some extent, you can apply them yourself. Now let's look at area of applications of general partial equilibrium. I want to believe that you are taught how to derive equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity using simple equations of quantity demand and quantity supply. Can give me feedback on this? Hello? Hello? Just one person. I hope
Yes,
you've been
sir.
taught.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
And you can mathematically derive what equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity yourself.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I think that's fine. Okay, let me just ask some simple questions to address that. Look at, I hope you can all see my slide.
Yes, sir.
And you can see the cursor. Now, why, in the case of quantity demand, why does 5p, why does it have a negative? Why does it have a negative sign?
Because demand is inversely related.
Because the relationship between
Yeah,
because the relationship
that's
between
okay.
Because it has
Yeah,
a
that's okay.
inverse
That's okay.
relationship.
That's okay. Oh yeah, off your mic. I think that's okay. You have a quantity demanded here, quantity demand functions here, 500 minus 5p, and you have your supply function. The negative sign here shows the nature of relationship between quantity and price, and that means it is inversely related. That's why you have a negative sign. I mean, when one goes up, the other one comes down. And for your supply functions, you can see you have a positive relationships, because if price increases, quantity supply will also increase. That's just positive relationships. And putting these equations together will give us, you have to calculate your P here. It's very straightforward. Just equate, because you are looking at equilibrium, you expect the quantity demand to be equal to quantity supply. And you can just equate the two with the two equations. By the time you equate them, make P subject of the formula, you have a price that is 57.14. That shows you equilibrium. That means equilibrium price. You can either substitute this P, either in quantity demanded or quantity, or the two at the same time, so that you can, by the time you substitute 57 in your demand equations, this is what you have. That means your equilibrium quantity is 214.3 and your equilibrium price is 57.14. Okay, Ogbeade, goodness, why are you raising up your hand? What do you want? Can ask your questions?
Sir,
Yes, I'm listening.
people want you to say that they are not seeing your screen.
You're not seeing my screen? Where? On YouTube?
Yes. People on YouTube. Yes, sir.
Okay. Let me reload the screen. Why are they not seeing it? Ask if there's they can see it now.
Sir, I just checked YouTube and I could see it.
Maybe it's just peculiar. Maybe it's just peculiar to one person that is not having a good network. Okay, and you can see it clearly, Abi? Okay, let's continue then. Okay, meaning that your quantity, this is your price, your equilibrium price. Your equilibrium price is 57.14, and your equilibrium quantity is that basically that is the situations at the market. But for us to really appreciate what we call partial equilibrium, it's possible that governments just come with a policy, like maybe there was a policy on the part of that government was trying to introduce at a point. Maybe they wanted to increase the VAT. You all know what VAT is now. At least you buy card, you buy stuff, and you see VAT included. The VAT is currently 5%, I'll be offer 7.5%, and they were trying to increase it to 10%. If they eventually increase it to 10%, it's going to increase what we are going to, it's going to increase what we are going to get after that level. And because of that, let's look at graphical analysis of our equilibrium. This shows the graphical analysis of our equilibrium. Now, this shows the graphical analysis of our equilibrium. The supply in red, the demand in blue, and that shows what's our the intersection of these two show what our equilibrium price is, and it also shows what our equilibrium quantity is. I want to believe that all of you can graphically depict this equilibrium. This is the mathematical solutions, and this is graphical solutions to the questions we raised earlier. But to really appreciate or have a good appreciations of what partial equilibrium is, we'll explore different policy actions of government. And from there, Ideraluwa, what do you want?
Sorry, sir. Good morning, sir.
Good
Sir,
morning.
some of my classmates are in the waiting room. They aren't
This
in
place
the
is
class.
full. If they are in the waiting room, they can go to YouTube. They don't have to stay in the waiting room. It automatically redirects them to YouTube.
Okay,
Don't have to
all right,
wait.
sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thanks, sir.
Yeah. Now that's what we have here. Because of that, we can look at a particular policy actions of government. And I just provided a background to that. If government want to increase, maybe they want to create a road user tax that everybody that use road must pay a tax of 10 naira, for using road. And there are several ways by which government can introduce such a tax policy. They can add extra 10 naira to the price of fuel or petrol that we consume. And because of that, that 10 naira will just be a constant 10 naira. And government will just use the money too. And what government can do in this case now, if government want to go through that route, introduce a constant 10 naira, to petrol, to add a constant 10 naira, we introduce a tax of 10 naira. And what will supplier do in this case? Don't forget that the supplier in this case, they will what would they do? That 10 naira is going to be part of their, it's going to be part of their cost. It's going to be part of their cost. Whatever their price is, they just have to include it as part of their cost. That 10 naira, don't forget the equations we have at the initial stage, where we have our supply equations. Don't forget these supply equations. This is 2P. That is QS is equal to 2P plus 100. In this case now, because of that policy, we are now introducing this 10 naira into the supply equations. So that is the area where, it's going to affect, specifically. Meaning that, what the supplier now pay is going to be, the cost of the supplier will definitely increase by 10. And when it increases, it's going to come in form of cost. And it's going to be, it's going to affect the price. It's going to affect the price of that supplier. That's why we bring that 10 naira minus P. That means whatever it is, we just introduce 10 naira minus P. And when you look at it now, this equation will change because we added 10 naira to P, and the new equilibrium price will emerge. And don't forget that, as a smart supplier, when government imposes such a tax on you, you are the one paying the tax to government. Now, when government imposes such a tax, you find a way of, increasing, of shifting part of that tax to consumer as well. Eberachi oye di kachi, What's your point? You don't just raise up hand if you don't have information.
Starting to just check something. So
Eh?
what is she like? I told you. What is
Amarachi, if your environment is noisy or your network is not clear, please, I don't want to
how
see your
many
hand up,
days?
please.
So it is 7.
Eh?
No, 7 like
Amarachi, I will remove you. If you raise up your hand and your environment is noisy, I will just remove you.
Emma, the thing is that Emma walk part time.
My question
Yeah, what's your question? What's your question? I have to mute everybody. There's a noisy background, and the person does not really worry. Is that clear? I have to mute everybody. Is that clear?
We'll see where it's at. We'll not throw it away. So, which one are you wearing? Let me see your hand. So, part time. And your back was okay by part time, just where well, you don't even use this to fix. Exactly. I don't even use it. You know that anyway comes on TikTok. Hey, you know the Are you his birthday? His birthday was like why can't you just be neat?
Okay. Sorry. Amarachi, I can listen to you now. Oh, yeah, what's the question?
Okay, so my question is
I
now
guess
you
the
said
network from your head is
$10.
not. Okay, I'm listening.
Sir, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now. I can hear
You
you.
said $10 tax. You said $10 tax was added. My
Okay.
question now is why was the tax subtracted from P? Why is it not as a cost, extra cost?
It's breaking. It's breaking. Your line is breaking. Your line is breaking. I can't. It's breaking. Your line is breaking. Maybe you can just type. You can just type. I can't hear you. I can't hear you. You can just type. Is that clear? Maybe just type. Okay, let's continue with the class. Now, when you now look at, as a producer, you want to transfer part of that cost to consumer as well. And what you would do basically is that, it depends on the nature of your goods. And when you now look at the new price, what can you see with the new price? The new price has increased. The initial price was 57 point, 57 point, has increased to 60. Meaning that part of consumer has to be a part of the cost of the tax as well. And when you now look at the new equilibrium, because of that, you can introduce the new 60 naira to either your quantity, to demand equations or to supply equation. And the new price, the new equilibrium quantity is now 200 naira. Meaning that when the price of the commodity increases to 60, the consumer has reduced what they consumed. Is that clear? And the equilibrium quantity has decreased from 214 to 200 naira, and the price has increased as a result of the introduction of that tax. That means introduction of that tax basically increases the prices and reduce the output. We've carried out, this is a policy decision of the government, and we've been able to analyze this policy decision within the context of the market affected. Policy like this, in a more broader field, we also have ripple effects in other markets. But we've curtailed our analysis, we've curtailed our explanations to this market alone. Whatever questions you have, you may have to hold it to the end of the class. Is that clear? Stop raising your hand. Now, that is what we are saying. At this point, we can look at other policy actions of government as well. Let's assume that and we can graphically analyze what we just did. The blue line still remains our demand functions, and the red line remains supply before tax. Supply before tax. Supply before tax. And our broken green is the supply after tax. After tax has been introduced, you can see that there's a shift, there's a bodily shift, in the supply curve to the left. And when there is bodily shift, that means there is decrease in supply as a result of that policy. And you can see our initial equilibrium 214, and you can see the new equilibrium to be what? To be after tax. And this can graphically depict what we just analyzed. And let's look at another policy decision of government. I know Dr. Ajayi talked about ceiling, but this is more practical, sense of that policy. If government decides to provide a ceiling, as a matter of policy, is a maximum. It has to do with maximum price that seller cannot exceed. Sometimes governments use maximum price to control inflations. They use maximum price to take care of the people who enjoy the commodity. That's what government was doing when government was fixing the price of petrol in Nigeria. Government was fixing the price of petrol. Maybe petrol will not be 150 naira. That means nobody is expected to sell beyond that. When government introduced ceiling, and we are still referring to our commodity that we discussed earlier. Ceiling does not necessarily mean that what government will recall ceiling does not necessarily to be above the equilibrium price. In most cases, ceiling is usually below the equilibrium price. In such a way that government just want to protect the consumer, like government did protect us during when government was fixing the price of petrol. Basically, now basically we'll look at ceiling. Ceiling doesn't have to be below the equilibrium. It can be above the equilibrium. It can be, but usually when government introduce ceiling, it's usually below the equilibrium because it's to protect the consumer from paying higher prices. And when government introduce ceiling by making the price of, let's use petrol for instance, to be 50 naira. Don't forget that our equilibrium is 57.14 naira. And government introduces to be 50 naira. And what is going to happen? Let's introduce 50 to our demand functions. By the time you introduce 50 to our demand function, what you're going to get is 250 naira. That means because the price is now below the equilibrium price, the quantity demanded has increased. The quantity demanded has increased because the price is now below the equilibrium price. But what will happen to quantity supply is going to reduce. The quantity supply will go down because the supplier or the producer has become more unwilling to supply, to the markets. And when this happens, what is going to happen? There will be shortage. That means there will be shortage. Now, that means there will be shortage of 50 units of that commodity because the demand has gone up to 250 and the supply has come down to 200. That means a shortage of 50 units is expected in the market. And if that happens, that's what price ceiling can actually cause. And when you look at this kind of situation now, we are speaking or we are analyzing within the context of the commodity. Maybe let's say petrol, for instance. Now we are analyzing within the context of that commodity. We are not looking at the ripple effects, as those as this such policy like this, as it's impact or at its rub on other markets. We just basically focus on this market. Yeah, we are going to look at different policy options and see how partial equilibrium focuses on an analysis. The one we just did, this is graphical illustrations. This gives us the graphical answer to what it does. That the equilibrium was at this point, like at this point 57.14. But at the discretion of the government decides to fix it around to fix it around 50. And that is what we are going to see. This is the quantity demanded. This is the quantity. This is the quantity demanded. Sorry, this is the quantity demanded. This is the quantity supply. And the difference between what we have here and what we have here is the shortage that is going to prevalent. That's going to prevalent the market. This line actually look at shortage in the market because because as a result of that policy actions. Whatever shortage you have here, the government, based on their discretion, can actually ameliorate by looking at other policy options to pacify the producers of the commodities, to bring more goods to the market. Now let's look at now. Can anybody check the YouTube if it's still working?
Sorry, sir.
The YouTube is still working. I want to be sure.
Sir, they said that it's blurry.
It's blurry.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes, sir.
okay. But it's still working, Abby, and you can hear me clearly.
Then let me confirm and get back to you.
That will be fine.
Sir, they can hear you. It's just that it's blurry.
Okay, no problems. Let's continue. Now, basically, there are several policy options or policy actions of government that can affect the equilibrium price. From the price and the government introduction of tax, we also have a situation whereby government provides subsidy. So maybe let's say some agricultural produce to make to guarantee food security and make sure that everybody is able to feed themselves. And in such a situation, the government can introduce subsidy. By the time government introduce subsidy, which part of the equations is it going to be affected? Let's say government introduce subsidy of 10 naira. Is it going to affect the supply side or is it going to affect the demand side of the equations as well? And when it affects the supply side, is it going to come as subtractions or addition to the cost? Okay, let's look at when government introduce subsidy, it's going to affect the quantity supply of that commodity. And it is a gain to supplier. And that's why we are adding P. You know what? I want you to remember that in the case of tax, we subtracted the cost of tax, the specific amount of tax from our P. But in this case of subsidy, we are adding it to our price. We're adding it to our price equation because it is an opportunity for the supplier or the producer of the commodity. It's add more, as in form of benefit to that to the supplier or and when you introduce that, you can have a new equilibrium as well. And when you have your new equilibrium, I'm not just the mathematics. I want to assume the mathematical process is not a problem. You should be able to do, make P subject of the formula and arrive at your equilibrium at this point. All of you, at least you enter with a credit in mathematics, Abby. I think credit pass in mathematics was required for you to do any course in management science or social science. That means you should not have problem with these mathematical jargons that we have here. And you are basically go back to what we did under our equilibrium initially. And all you need to do is to add 10 to your P from the supply side and make P subject to the formula. And the new price, when you look at it, is 54.3. This is far below, this is relatively below our equilibrium price of 57. And why is it below the equilibrium price of 57? Because government has helped the supplier to cover part of the cost of productions. They did not add to the cost of production, but they've helped them to cover part of the cost of productions. And if that is the case, the consumer or the producer should reduce the price at which they sell the commodity, meaning that the price will go down because government has provided subsidy. And that is what we enjoy during petroleum subsidy. When government was paying subsidy, the price was low. When government removes subsidy, the price was high. If government introduces tax, the price will go up. If government introduces subsidy, the price will come down. That is what we have here. And from there, you can also just calculate what is going to be your new equilibrium price and new equilibrium quantity. The new equilibrium price has gone down. And what happened to the new equilibrium price? Despite the fact that the equilibrium price has gone down, the equilibrium quantity has increased because of the subsidy. Now, why? Why do you think equilibrium price has increased? It has increased because the government has reduced or has offset part of the cost of the supplier or the producer, as the case may be, of the commodity. And because of this role by the government, by offsetting this part of the cost, the producer or supplier are more willing to bring more commodity to the market. And that's what we are going to experience. Subsidy generally lower the prices and increases the output. And that is what we have in the case of subsidy. And this is going to be our new quantity. The new quantity is going to be 228.5. And the old, as against the 214 that we had under the previous analysis. And this can be graphically illustrated or represented thus. This is the demand curve. Our demand curve still remain the same. But we now have a new, when things like this happen, when government introduces tax or when government, it does not bring about a bodily shift. It does not create, it can bring about movement because it's going to affect the equilibrium price. It can bring about the movement along the demand curve. But it will create a bodily shift on the supply side. That's why we have the supply side before, this is the supply side before the introduction of subsidy. And this is the supply side. The broken green is after the introduction. You can see it bodily shifts to the right. And when supply side bodily shifts to the right, it means that there's increase in supply. Increase in supply. And because it's a shift, it's increase in supply that we're having these situations. And your demand curve still remain the same. And there can be movement along that demand curve. And that depicts a movement from 57.14 to 54 point something, around point something. And that is what we have in the case of when government introduce a subsidy in an economy. And you can see that we are restricting our analysis, because we are dealing with partial equilibrium now. All these analyses are restricted to just one commodity or just one market, as we have here. And another one that is also common is what we have a floor price. A floor price is like when we dealt with maximum price, and when we are discussing ceiling, the opposite can also happen when government want to protect the producer of commodity. The floor price is actually to enable the producer to enjoy a bit of benefit. And that is what happened to many of the farm produce in a country like US. Government usually want to protect the farmer. And sometimes floor price can be introduced to protect this farmer. This is the minimum price by which the commodity cannot go below. That is but usually your floor price, most likely, they are usually higher than the equilibrium price. They are usually higher than the equilibrium price. Government wants to, because if you leave it to the interplay of quantity demanded, what is going to be determined as equilibrium price is something that is not going to be profitable to the producer. In most cases, when government introduces maximum price, is to protect the consumer, and when government introduces floor price, is to protect the producer or the supplier of the commodity. And when something like this happens, what are you going to do? what are you going to do? You look at your, to solve for P in this situation as well. You look at your, we are still going back to our demand and supply equations. Introduce your P. This is your, in this case, you look at your demand side. You look at your demand side. Look at our demand side, 500 minus 50p, meaning that in the case of floor, in the case of maximum, you look at supply side. But in the case of floor, you look at the demand side, because in this case, government is just trying to protect the supplier of the product. And by the time you introduce your new P, the P into the equation, in your demand equations, what we are going to have is going to be 500 minus 650 times, 50 times multiply your new price now. Then I have 200, and it gives you the new equilibrium price is going to be 3.75, because without this is going to be without floor price. This is your equilibrium without floor price. Are we together? This is equilibrium. We are trying to introduce a new equation different from what we are working with, because we know that it's going to affect the supply side of the economy. This is your equilibrium without introduction of the floor price. Your equilibrium is 3.75. 3.75 without floor price. And what we have here is that introducing your P into the equations, your quantity demand and quantity supply equations, this is what we have. You have 3.75 as your equilibrium price, and you have 312.5 kilograms as your equilibrium quantity. Now, let's introduce the floor price by government. The government introduces the floor price by government. Your quantity demanded will change. And don't forget that your quantity demanded, you can, just introduce it to, your quantity demanded will change to 200, and your quantity supply will change to 380. And what do you think happened? Don't forget that these are our previous equilibrium quantity. Because of the floor price, I told you that the floor price is usually greater than the equilibrium price. And the whole essence of floor price is to protect the consumer. Your quantity demanded has come down because the price is above the equilibrium. It's above the equilibrium. And the quantity demand at the supply has increased, has gone up. The quantity supply has gone up because the producer or the supplier want to take maximum advantage of increase in price, which the floor price has introduced for them. And because of that, you are going to have there will be, in this case now, there will be shortage of demand. There will be shortage of demand because people will not be willing to pay more than the equilibrium. The willingness of people to pay more than the equilibrium price is not there. And because of that, there will be shortage of demand. There will be shortage of goods. There will be excess, there will be gluts. What we call gluts, meaning that there will be so many commodity undemanded, in the markets. Producer will just be looking at that commodity because the price has gone up. And for the market to clear, maybe the price may need to come down a bit in this instance. And those are partial equilibrium analysis. Those are the applications of partial equilibrium analysis. We've looking at maximum price. We've looked at tax imposition by the government. We look at subsidy. We've looked at minimum price, which our price floor actually depicts. Graphically, this can be illustrated here. This can be illustrated. In the case of floor price, I told you that floor price is usually more higher than the equilibrium. This is the equilibrium, and this is the floor price introduced by the government. And this actually brings about movement along the supply curves and stuff like that. And you can see that there will be gluts, there will be excess supply of the commodities in the markets. And I think, and the interpretation, limitations of partial equilibrium. Partial equilibrium as a concept has its own limitations. And the limitations can be viewed from this basic angle. It's because it's actually restricted economy to particular portions. And economy is always broad. You have a very a very wide market to analyze in an economy. But the limitation of the equilibrium is that it restricts your analysis to a particular portion of the economy. And it also lacks the ability to study the interrelations of all parts of the economy. Because of your equilibrium you're analyzing is partial, you don't have what it takes to analyze the entire economy as a whole. they are dealing with just one, aspect of the economy instead of, looking at the entire economy as a whole. And the analysis show if the improbable assumption, when you look at most of the assumptions in partial equilibrium analysis, they are not very realistic. It disconnect because of this disconnection from other markets. It makes most of the assumptions, unrealistic. And it has been unsuccessfully in explaining the outcome of economic disturbance in the market that leads to demand and supply. In most cases, the partial equilibrium cuts itself up from explaining those, the outcome of economic disturbance in market that leads to the demand and supply changes. They don't give you background. They don't give you information that, I was the one that was actually trying to look at probable causes of disturbance in partial equilibrium analysis. Usually, you just hear that the supply moves, the demand change, and all of that. You don't get to hear, or you don't get to know about what are the causes of those disturbance. These are major limitations to partial equilibrium analysis. And in the real world, it's applicable in Nigerian settings, it's applicable in different areas. You can look at the application in the area of fuel subsidies in Nigeria. You can look at the application in the area of minimum wage laws. You can also look at the applications in import tariffs. These are these are areas where you can actually apply partial equilibrium to carry out a serious economics analysis. Okay, I think I can welcome questions at this point. What are those? What are the questions? Okay, if you have questions, you can raise up your hand. Questions? Hello, you can mute yourself. Murolaker. Yeah, what are your questions?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
I would like
Your line is breaking. Your line is breaking. Your line is breaking. I can't hear you. Your line is
How
breaking.
about now?
Yeah, it's better now.
Okay. I said I would like to know what is the difference between partial equilibrium and equilibrium itself, because I don't think I've heard of partial equilibrium before.
Yeah. I think I show you something to differentiate. What we have basically, there are two types of equilibrium we have in economics: partial equilibrium and general equilibrium. And I did show you this table to differentiate between the two. When you say mention just equilibrium, you are not saying anything. And as an economist, by the time you are analyzing, I can tell you whether what you analyze is a partial equilibrium or general equilibrium. I don't have to be explicit. If I say equilibrium and I continue with the analysis, if I'm analyzing, a commodity market and I'm focusing on rice, or I'm focusing on which other commodity, popular commodity, on maybe rice, beans, or something, and I'm not connecting them to other markets, I'm basically dealing with partial equilibrium. But when I'm beginning to look at different markets we have in economy, I'm looking at the factor markets where factor of productions are being procured. I'm looking at financial markets where capital for investment are being sourced, and I'm also looking at commodity market as a whole. That means I'm analyzing general equilibrium. Is that clear? Is that clear? Hello, another person. I think another person.
Okay, so thank you very much.
Yeah,
Yes, very clear now. Thank you. Yes,
do you
sir,
have
very
more
clear
questions?
now. Thank
Yes, yes,
you.
that's taken. That's taken. More questions? Okay, Bakari Deborah. Bakari Deborah.
Yes, sir. Sorry, please, I don't understand anything.
Eh?
I don't understand anything that you just explained.
You did not understand what? I didn't get that.
I don't understand anything that you explained since the beginning of the class.
And that's your own problem then. It's not mine. You don't have a specific questions to ask, or you can say that you don't understand anything I've explained. Should I now explain everything again or start the class again? That doesn't make sense to me. That means you are not listening properly or attentively. Any other questions? Okay, Akin. Sorry. Akindele, is it Akin? I didn't get that. Oh, yeah, can I raise up your hand again? I think Akin something. Good morning, how are you?
Fine, thank you, sir.
Oh, yeah, your questions?
Please, can we have a slide, sir?
That's not a question. That's not a question. If you have questions, let's ask. The issue of whether you can have a slide is another thing entirely. Okay, that's success.
The question is, according to the explanation now,
Okay.
pricing it's like is favoring the suppliers, while price flow is favoring the consumer, right, sir?
I didn't get that. Price what? Hello? Okay, yes. Price, I think if I can infer from what I faintly heard, is that price ceiling is to protect the consumer, and it's in let me say, if I want to use your word, it's in the favor of the consumer, while price floor is in the favor of producer, and it's to protect the producer. I hope that is clear.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Yeah, bring down your hand. More questions? Do you have more questions? Yeah, Olatinwo.
Good morning, sir. Sir, please, we're
Good morning.
dropping questions for you in the chat box. Please, can you check it?
Okay. Let's check. Oh, okay. Let me see. Can I? I think a whole lot of relevant things are there. It's always difficult. Okay. Is partial equilibrium an aspect of microeconomics as it relates to one aspect and not the whole? Yes, you are correct. Partial equilibrium is an aspect of microeconomics because it's basically related to, yes, that's correct. An aspect of microeconomics. Okay, yes. I think I've answered the only questions I've seen in the chat. I think I've answered it. Do you have any questions there again that I've not attended to? Please, yeah, Yusuf Zainal.
You said, good morning, sir.
Yeah, good morning.
You said the supplier and the consumers are both the price taker. Does that mean the government fix the price?
Yeah, in the partial equilibrium, don't forget that we have assumptions of perfect competitions. I don't know whether you still remember market structure very well. Under the assumption of perfect competitions, no buyer or seller has so much influence to influence the market price. They are both price taker, both the buyer and the seller. That does not mean that the government, the industry, let me, I don't know whether you still remember this very well. Under perfect competitive assumption, perfect market competitions assumptions, we have large number of buyers and we also have large number of sellers. And when you have large number of buyer and large number of sellers like that, what happens is that none of the buyer or none of the seller is strong enough or has so much power to influence the price. They are basically price taker, whether they are buyer or seller in a perfect competitive market. That is the assumption that is projected here. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Bakari Deborah.
Sir, please, how can we get votes?
Yeah.
Notes.
Notes? That is not a question, so. That is not a question. There are more questions. I hope you can handle those simple mathematical analysis. Yeah, in absence of no questions, I think we can round up the class. We'll meet next class, and by the time we meet next class, we'll be discussing market structures. Though I think we've discussed a bit of market competitions current, as we have it current, in the course of analyzing partial equilibrium. We've made mention of perfect competition. It's one of the market structure we'll be discussing by the time we meet next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye. Okay, Dera, what do you want? Can we listen to her? Probably.
Sir,
Dera.
sir, it's not a
Yeah.
question. I mean,
It's not a question?
sir, it's not a question according to you. Sir, it's
Okay.
not a question.
What is it?
So I want to ask for the slides. So are you going to be giving out
That's not a question.
slides?
I don't know.
So I said so.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Sir,
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
sir, can you hear me?
Thank you, sir.